Hello and welcome. This is the Freedom Research Podcast, and my name is Anna Sarv. My guest today is Dr. Robert Malone, a well-known scientist, a medical doctor, a biochemist who is the inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology, the platform used for the COVID vaccines as well. During the pandemic, he was very critical of government response and especially thought of children when the government closed down schools, for example, and pushed to vaccinate them. And of course, for all his criticism, he has been labeled a misinfo spreader, targeted by fact checkers, not giving credit for his work as a scientist, even banned from social media and so on. Like you would expect in today's world, sadly, this all is happening to the ones who are critical of the main narrative, so to say. So, Dr. Malone, it is really nice to meet you, and thank you for taking the time and talking to us.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for your contributions as an independent journalist and your commitment to seeking truth, despite all of the censorship and other disincentives to providing true and accurate information.
Thank you. So I wanted to start from a recent development. A Nobel Prize for Medicine was awarded recently to, I hope I'm pronouncing them correctly, Katalin Karikó and Drew Weissman for the work they did on mRNA vaccines. So the moment I heard of this news, I actually thought of you, and I just thought, what would Dr. Robert Malone say about this award given to those scientists? So now I have the opportunity to ask, what were your thoughts when you heard about it?
I wasn't surprised, although at one level I was. I know that their contributions were assessed by the committee to select the prize 2 years ago in 2021. And the committee at that time, I know from insiders that participated, made a determination that their contributions were not really that significant. And a decision was made to not proceed, plus the let's say, maturity of the technology and its usefulness for vaccines was not yet clearly demonstrated its safety and effectiveness in 2021. So I frankly didn't expect anyone to receive a Nobel Prize for anything relating to these vaccines, given all of the safety and lack of efficacy that has been demonstrated subsequently. So at one level, I was surprised. At another level, I wasn't, because I'm well aware that there's longstanding commercial and financial ties between the Karolinska Institute, Moderna, and Pfizer. And the Pfizer's contributions to the Karolinska Institute are quite large. Karolinska being the ones that provide the faculty that make the selection and participate in the selection committee. In a sense, so I took a day before I commented on anything to listen and try to understand the committee's decision-making, and reviewed their statements and press release and the subsequent interviews that they gave to the press upon the award. It's important to look at what they've actually awarded. This is an award for the discoveries concerning nucleoside base modifications that enabled the development of effective mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. Now, there's no doubt that Karikó and Weissman published 4 papers that described the incorporation of pseudouridine into synthetic mRNA, and that when that synthetic mRNA manufactured in the same way that I first described, of the same basic sequence structure, when it is administered in vivo, it triggers a strong immune response and an inflammatory response, an acute inflammatory response. And Karikó and Weissman showed that that's at least partially driven by dendritic cell activation and that incorporation of pseudouridine could cause that to be suppressed. In other words, addition of pseudouridine throughout the entire mRNA molecule, and this is pseudouridine that is akin to that found in natural RNA at specific places, could suppress that acute inflammatory response. That's true. Now, the pseudouridine that's being used in these vaccines currently is not the one that Carrico and Weissman used. It's a modification. It's 7-methyl pseudouridine, which is more like thymidine in its structure. But that part is essentially true in what the committee has stated in their award. This actually was not enabling technology. And we know that because the European company CureVac is able to get quite good immune responses against, chemically synthesized mRNA that does not have pseudouridine when injected into rats or into humans. So it's not actually enabling. So that part of the logic is false. And then they say effective mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. Note they don't say anything about safety in this statement, and they don't define what effective is. So effective can be anything you want. If we say that effective means it reduces your risk compared to completely naive patients of hospitalization or death, that's probably true. Do these products prevent infection, replication, or spread of the virus, and do they prevent you from being hospitalized or dying? That's not true. None of those things are true. The committee also was asked by a Chinese journalist during their press briefing about the safety of these products, and the committee gave an answer that was also false. They asserted that the products are safe, that the only major adverse event is myocarditis, and that it's almost exclusively in young men, and that it resolves quickly. That's all a false statement. Okay, so the committee demonstrated that they don't really understand what they're talking about. They made a number of other statements subsequently in this regard, and most fascinating was that Carrico and Weissman accepted a surrogate award wearing masks. So if the vaccines were so effective, why did they need to use masks when they were accepting the award? All of this points, and then the Nobel Committee issued another statement in which they said that they hoped that the primary consequence of this award would be to increase vaccine uptake of these mRNA vaccines. So what all of that taken together indicates that this was really done for propaganda purposes. It was not really science-based. It was intended to gain more global acceptance of this technology and these products at a time when it's being demonstrated that they have a relatively short period of effectiveness, and the more of these you take, in other words, the boosters, you develop what's called negative effectiveness at some period of time after receiving them. What that means is you're actually more likely to get disease within 3 or 6 months after taking the product than somebody that didn't take it. And the data clearly demonstrate that these products are not preventing infection, replication, and spread. They're not preventing disease and death, and they are actually inferior to natural infection, the immunity associated with natural infection. So in conclusion, I hope Katie Carrico, who used to be, was from Hungary, changed her name when she came to the United States. Many have asserted she was associated with Hungarian intelligence surveillance. She built a new life in the United States. She's spoken at length about how hard that has been and how hard it's been as an academic. And I congratulate her and Drew Weissman on their award. I hope it brings them happiness. They received many other awards and so have now accumulated millions of dollars in prize money. And I wish them the best. But the award was made ostensibly not for the development of the technology or its invention, which is highly unusual, but rather for a specific modification that was claimed to be enabling, but isn't, for the development of what are claimed to be effective COVID-19 vaccines, which aren't effective and aren't safe. Finally, in conclusion, if the logic here is to award the prize for enabling technology, what really made this happen? What made it possible to the extent that we have these products and they have some effectiveness? Then the prize really should go to Peter Cullis, that's Pieter Cullis, and his colleagues at the University of British Columbia, who've spent decades working on this use of positively charged fats or cationic lipids to deliver mRNA and DNA. And they're the ones that made the breakthrough that is enabling of all of three of these vaccines, CureVac, BioNTech, Pfizer, and Moderna. They're the ones that really created the enabling invention and technology. And so if anybody has a case to be made, because in my case, I had nothing to do with these vaccines. I invented the technology platform and reduced it to practice with other colleagues at Vical 15 years before Katie Carrico even started to look at using mRNA for delivery. And even then, she didn't focus on vaccines for quite a while. But it's Cullis et al. That have really made this go forward after decades of hard work. They came up with the formulations that involve a tertiary instead of a quaternary amine, so it can be changed its charge on the amine, which is crucial. And the use of polyethylene glycol on the surface of these particles, that's also Peter Cullis. And the structures of the specific positively charged synthetic fats that are used are all based on the work of Cullis and others, had nothing to do with Carrico and Weissman. Mm-hmm. So there's my assessment here. It's this Nobel Prize appears to be awarded largely for political and propaganda/marketing purposes, and not for scientific achievement.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you point that out because, well, it used to be for the journalists, for the investigative journalists as well as any other critical thinker to try to follow the money. So in that sense, if we would actually follow the money regarding those vaccines, then we would say that well, in medical terms, I think you agree that probably those vaccines, COVID vaccines, have been a failure, but in terms of wealth for certain individuals and companies, it has been a great success. So would you agree, were those vaccines mainly failing us in medical terms, and only their effectiveness can be measured with the numbers that they're creating for the companies?
Certainly, it helps that the companies are indemnified from any liability. It's interesting that currently the market cap or valuations of those companies on the stock market have been declining for quite a while. And there seems to be a real strong effort to market these, quote, booster vaccines in the United States. I don't think it's being successful in Europe. But here in the United States, we now have major universities and hospitals mandating the use of these boosters, even though they haven't been shown to be effective or safe. And they are mismatched. They are designed for the Kraken strain, which is now extinct in the United States and has been replaced by a more adapted strain called Eris that's better able to escape the antibodies that are elicited by these vaccines. And so in the United States, the justification for allowing these under emergency use at a time when we no longer have a public health emergency, that's another thing that's happened here, is that the FDA and the CDC have no longer feel bound by US law. And even though we don't have a public health emergency, they're still using emergency use authorization for these products. And the products are mismatched. And the only data that we really have about whether or not they would be effective in any sense in humans comes from vaccination studies in mice and a particular type of assay called a neutralization assay, which has not been shown to predict protection. So basically, we have no data in humans and very limited data in mice, which have not been shown to the public or to healthcare providers. We're not allowed to see those data. We're just told that they demonstrate that there's cross-reactivity using an assay in mouse serum that has never been shown to correlate with protection. So that's where we're at in the United States, but the government is trying to market these. The government in the United States has already purchased a large number of these vaccines. And so they are working very hard to try to get Americans to take these products. And as I mentioned, universities and healthcare systems are starting to mandate that these products be taken if one is going to participate in either the healthcare environment or as a student. So that's the status. And I guess the hope is that this will improve the market capitalization, the valuation of these companies. But my sense is that Wall Street is well aware that the technology is not meeting expectations, and they've already factored that into the stock price.
So you think it's basically or probably because of money that they are pushing it?
I think money is a component and lobbying is a component, but there's also an issue here that has to do with government and influencers, particularly in academia, having so much invested in the belief system that these are safe and effective, that they really can't back down from that. I refer to this in a recent essay and in another one that I'm developing right now that has to do with the money that's gone into a lot of this. It's very immature. It's a form of denialism that's going on. It may also have something to do with Matthias Desmet's mass formation hypothesis, or the madness of crowds, or mass psychosis, or mass hypnosis, are different terms that are used for this. But I think Matthias Desmet in his book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism, covers it quite well. We do have some sort of a group psychology effect going on that makes it very difficult for those people who have accepted this storyline or this messaging that these products are safe and effective, a phrase that's been repeated again and again and again. So there's two key phrases that have been repeated all over the world. That the one is the vaccines are safe and effective, and the other one is that nobody is safe until everybody is safe. That's another one that's been repeated again and again. And what it refers to is that all people in the population must accept vaccination to protect the general population. This is the logic of you must take the vaccine to protect grandma. And both of those are false. The vaccines are clearly not safe and effective. And the logic of we all must get vaccinated is about herd immunity. And it was known in late 2021 by the CDC in a slide deck that was published by the Washington Post that even if 110% of all Americans or all people in a nation were to accept the vaccine, in other words, more than 100% uptake of the vaccines with masking, still could not provide herd immunity. So this is all built on lies. And the biggest lie of all was that the virus was associated with a case fatality rate. In other words, what's your probability of dying if you got infected? Of 3.4%. This is false. This is based on faulty modeling from Neil Ferguson's group at the Imperial College in London, a group that has repeatedly overestimated risk in other cases. And this 3.4% case fatality rate modeling estimate has been the basis for all of these very heavy-handed authoritarian policies that we've experienced, the lockdowns, shutting schools, required masking, and the vaccine mandates. But that's been clearly shown to be false. The case fatality rate is a fraction of 1%. And the case fatality rate in healthy children is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. It is tiny. It's essentially zero. So we've been told a series of lies as part of a marketing effort to get us to accept a vaccine, because under the logic that that could get us to herd immunity and stop the spread of this virus that's now mutated to the point that it's essentially like a common cold. And none of that was true. The vaccine could never achieve that objective. Another thing that the Nobel Prize Committee got wrong was in their press briefing, they said that the pseudouridine modification is what enabled the rapid development of these mRNA vaccines. And let's examine that for a minute. That's actually not true also. What enabled the rapid development of not only these vaccines, but also, for instance, Sinovac from Russia, which developed in about the same timeline, but doesn't use gene therapy technology. What enabled the rapid development of these
it was from China?
No, it's from Russia. Sinovac is Russia, I'm pretty sure.
Wasn't Russia's vaccine called
I apologize. Sputnik. I'm referring to Sputnik, not Sinovac.
Okay.
Yes, Sputnik. Thank you for that correction. So Sputnik was also developed under this very short timeline using the same process of dropping the normal procedures, the normal internationally agreed upon procedures and tests for demonstrating that a vaccine is safe and effective. That's what was responsible for the rapid development, not the invention of pseudouridine incorporating into mRNA. What enabled the rapid development was the willingness of governments all across the world to drop the normal procedures that have been used for decades to ensure that vaccines are safe and effective. So I guess we should have given the Nobel Prize to the FDA and the US Congress for the emergency use authorization process, if that was the justification. But that's what's happened here, is that we had a series of lies, the biggest of which was that this was a highly lethal virus, and that the vaccines that were developed using gene therapy technology were safe and effective. And if all members of the population accepted those vaccines, then we would obtain herd immunity. None of those things are true. But on the basis of that logic, we've been forced to take these vaccines, to shut down, to engage in all these procedures that have damaged our economies, caused, whatever the cause is, we clearly have a major increase in all-cause mortality that coincides with the onset of the vaccination campaigns. Now, some of that might be due to opiate deaths and suicides and depressions and other factors, but it certainly is odd that none of that happened before the vaccines were rolled out. And after they rolled out, we see this. And for instance, Theo Schutters in the Netherlands has demonstrated by looking at data from nursing homes, and now Steve Kirsch is duplicating that. Because in the Netherlands, they perform vaccination campaigns in elder care facilities or extended care facilities. Theo was able to obtain data from two different sources from the government that showed the incidence of vaccination in these campaigns, and then the following increase in excess all-cause mortality after those campaigns in those same nursing homes. So it's about a 1 to 2 week delay, and they do a wave of vaccination, then they get a wave of excess all-cause mortality, and then a period of time, and then they do another vaccination campaign for the boosters, and they get another wave of excess all-cause mortality. So in drug development, we would call that a challenge-rechallenge experiment, and that's considered very strong proof of association. So that's where we're at. We have, various parties, for instance, in Germany, that are objecting to the European Union policies. We have Poland that's no longer accepting these vaccines. It has given them back to the European Union and given back the money that they were given to administer them. And we have Romania, where the dominant political party, and it's looking like they're going to really increase their representation with this next election, has come out very strongly against these policies and these vaccines. In Australia, there's been some political turnaround, and a considerable amount of information is coming out about the basically fraud and malfeasance that's occurred there. Yet throughout the rest of the world, we have, particularly in the United States, this campaign to continue administering these products to the general population, including pregnant women and children, neither of which have been shown to be safe or effective.
Yeah, exactly. So, what do you say? How strong you think is the link between vaccination, COVID-19 vaccines, and the excess mortality?
Well, that's why I mentioned the data from Theo Schutters. That seems to show a very strong correlation, and a repeated one, between vaccination, but this is in elders. So this is, I think it's 63 and older. So it's not a general population that he's looking at, it's nursing home patients. But of course, these are the ones that are considered to be at highest risk.
But excess mortality, excess mortality is high in different countries, in many countries. So,
Yes.
And it all correlates to the vaccine campaigns.
That increase in excess all-cause mortality did not occur during 2020, when we had some of the more lethal and more pathogenic viruses circulating. It started after the deployment of the vaccines. So with that kind of data, it's always hard to demonstrate cause and effect. But when you see that type of correlation, what it should trigger is a concerted effort on the part of the World Health Community, whether it's WHO or national health authorities and epidemiologists, to assess cause and effect. That's going to be difficult to prove, but unfortunately, the data that we have that is more specific to vaccine-associated adverse events have been contaminated by a number of different types of biases throughout the world. And it may be that the excess all-cause mortality data is the best we have at this point.
So we don't see any effort by the medical community, the WHO or the officials in different countries to actually get to the bottom of why there are why the excess mortality is so big. So why is that so? What do you think?
That would require me to be able to read the mind of Mr. Tedros or others, and I can't do that. It's just a limitation I have. I'm not a mind reader.
Of course.
Um, it's certainly curious, and it's inexplicable, and it certainly is consistent with the hypothesis that this is what we call willful ignorance, that there is a desire to not know that, to not understand that. That could be I think is the strongest hypothesis that I can come up with about why this would not be being investigated by public health officials. If it was to turn out, let's just imagine that it was the case that one could establish a strong correlation between vaccine administration campaigns at the national and global level and excess all-cause mortality, then we would have a major political problem. It would compromise the World Health Organization's legitimacy. It would compromise the legitimacy, which is already deeply compromised, of the FDA and the CDC and EMA and the Canadian National Healthcare System and the British National Healthcare System. The cascade effect, if this was clearly documented, that governments mandated the uptake of a product that caused significant increase in excess all-cause mortality, the political ramifications of that would be enormous. And just the same as the political consequences that would occur if the People's Republic of China and the United States government were to admit what we all know to be true, which is that this virus originated from laboratory recombinant experimentation or gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, conducted within China and funded by the United States government. If that was to become clear, then those two governments would have enormous liability worldwide for what has happened. And again, that would have enormous political consequences. There is no way that they can continue other than with lying. I'm reminded of Solzhenitsyn's quote, they lie to us, we know they lie to us, they know we know they lie to us, and yet they still continue to lie, and we still continue to listen to them and believe them.
Yeah. So still about those vaccines again, it's kind of right now even I would say no point of denying that there are for those who are still believing the safe and effective narrative as well, that there are serious side effects or adverse events related to those vaccines. If you just you have to be blind or close your eyes if you don't see them. So why are there so many adverse events related to those vaccines?
We have a combination of different types of toxicities, none of which were well characterized because there was such a rush to move these products into arms, into deployment. The toxicities fall into three categories. There's toxicities associated with the pseudouridine, the structure of the RNA that's used, which is immunosuppressive. And so we have toxicities associated with immunosuppression. This is, for instance, the cancers, autoimmune disease, and some of the other adverse events. The reactivation, perhaps, of latent DNA viral infections and other types of consequences of immune damage. There is the toxicities associated with the formulation itself. These are referred to as lipid nanoparticles. Technically, that's not an accurate term. Nanotechnology is 100 nanometers or less, and many of these particles are actually larger than 100 nanometers. But let's call them lipid nanoparticles because that's the general term that's being used. These lipid nanoparticles are still highly inflammatory and toxic, and they do trigger a variety of direct types of toxicities. And you can see that, for instance, in the data from Moderna, when Moderna dosed an influenza-based mRNA vaccine at 100 micrograms, the same dose that's used for the COVID vaccines. And in phase 1 trials, they had about 30 to 40% of the patients experience severe adverse events. So that means that there's something about the formulation that's intrinsically toxic. Then there's the payload, is what the technical term is, the thing that is produced, the spike protein. And spike protein is a toxin. It directly interacts with ACE2, an important regulatory protein, cell surface regulatory protein that controls blood pressure and many other things. It's been shown that we have similar toxicities in terms of both cardiac damage and coagulation, blood clotting problems. With the adenovirus vectors that express this spike protein, with the Novavax product that manufactures it in caterpillar cells and then injects it as a purified protein, and with the mRNA product. So in the prior adenovirus vectored vaccine studies, we did not observe this cardiotoxicity and tendency towards blood coagulation problems. So that says that it's not the platform, it's the payload, it's the expressed protein. So in sum, we have a variety of toxicities that are occurring all over the body. And remember, blood coagulation can damage virtually any part of the body: the brain, the gonads, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, the immune system, your endocrine system, any system that is dependent on blood circulation, which is to say any part of your body, can be damaged by agents which cause blood clotting, irregular blood clotting. So that's absolutely the case here. And so it's no surprise that we see this wide range of toxic effects. What's most concerning are the delayed toxicities that are now starting to emerge in the literature, and physicians are observing them. Most prominently, those are autoimmune disease and very aggressive cancers that the slang term is turbo cancers, that are occurring in people that were previously considered to have been recovered or have very, very rapid development of aggressive cancers, unusually rapid and unusually aggressive after vaccination. And then, of course, we have the strokes, which are definitely a blood clotting problem. And it's the strokes, the myocardial infarctions, these sudden death events that occur quite often. You know, they can occur shortly after administration, but they can occur a long period after also. We also have anaphylactic shock, and that can kill people on a short term. And that seems to come from two things. It turns out that the manufacturing process used by Pfizer, at least, is not removing all of the endotoxin that comes from the bacterial sources that are used to manufacture these products. So endotoxin-associated shock and also polyethylene glycol-associated shock seem to be two immediate adverse events that are damaging or killing patients, a small number of patients, after direct administration. So many different types of toxicities, because this is one of the most the FDA and the manufacturers have asserted that this is just like any other vaccine technology. It's not. This is an extremely complicated combination product. It involves novel drugs. It involves biologically active new chemical entities. It involves new biologics that have never been in humans before, such as these 7-methylpseudouridine containing mRNAs. And none of those toxicities have been evaluated by the sponsor or the government prior to rollout of these products. This is highly, highly unusual. I've never heard of this with new product development. Always the norm is that you have to characterize the toxicities of each of these new chemical entities and demonstrate that each of them contribute to the activity of the overall final combination product. None of that was done.
So what is kind of puzzling to me when we look back now as well is that, as you mentioned, the disease itself is not that deadly. Let's put it that way. What was it like?
Well, we can specifically say 3.4% case fatality rate was a false number.
Yeah,
That's been shown repeatedly, and the true case fatality rate is a fraction of 1%.
yeah, exactly. So, and also about those vaccines, we know that there are adverse events. We can suspect that there are a lot more people who have suffered.
We have compiled a list of peer-reviewed publications, academic publications, of adverse events associated with these products. It's over 7,000 citations long. Dr. Trozy in Canada has one that's over 10,000 long. In contrast, we also have a bibliography of about 6,000 publications focused on improving vaccine acceptance and overcoming vaccine hesitancy. So we've had a massive public investment by non-governmental organizations and governmental organizations in the psychology of overcoming people's unwillingness to take these products. So what we really have is a major psychological operations activity that has been deployed globally to get people to accept these products, together with denial that there are safety signals. And that denial has come in the form of gaslighting, censorship, defamation, making it extremely difficult to publish, etc. There's been a concerted campaign to suppress any information from the public about what the risks are, under the justification that any information, whether it's true or false, that would cause the public to become less likely to accept these products needs to be suppressed. In other words, basically, the government's World Health Organization and these various NGOs working together with corporate media and social media have decided that it is absolutely necessary to block informed consent under in response to the need to get as many people vaccinated with these products as possible. That's what's happened. So there's been three big things: lies about the safety and effectiveness, lies about the risk of the virus, and propaganda, censorship, and lies to suppress anybody questioning or raising concerns or publishing data that demonstrate that any of those lies are actually false, under the logic that that would cause people to not accept this vaccine that is neither safe nor effective.
So that's exactly what I was thinking of. The lies, well, they have to be huge, or this operation of suppressing scientists and doctors who do not agree is also kind of a huge thing. That is what I'm kind of puzzling here, is that how come our institutions failed in such a big way?
So
Why?
that question right there is the basis for our book, "The Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Future Coming," that was published last December, right around Christmas time, and has been a major focus of our Substack investigations in my journalism. I've been labeled a Minuteman journalist now by an article in Politico in the United States, together with many others. These people that have risen to the problem of sharing information that is suppressed. And I have come to the conclusion, personally, based on multiple lines of evidence and personal interviews with people who are members, active agents of the CIA, that the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, and the Five Eyes Alliance, but particularly the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agencies, or DIA, in the United States, have been involved in almost every single one of these major events associated with the COVID crisis, beginning with the funding of the original Wuhan Institute of Virology and the development of the virus. Moderna was funded by the CIA through DARPA. The development and advancement of this technology has been advanced by the US intelligence community. The advancement of the lies about the severity of the disease was actively promoted by the US intelligence community. The bringing in of the China solutions like lockdown and masking into the United States and then throughout the world was facilitated by members of the US intelligence community. The CIA has been involved in every one of these points. And the case has been, the CIA founded the World Economic Forum. A case has been made that, and I think the evidence is quite strong, the CIA was involved in in Event 201 at Johns Hopkins. They were central to that planning for how the world would respond to a coronavirus crisis. Every point, the CIA has been involved, including funding. The CIA, a good case can be made, is the most powerful organization, if not the most powerful intelligence organization in the world right now. It influences governments, it influences political parties, it influences finance and national agendas, it influences geopolitics, particularly in Africa and in Latin America and in Europe. What is inexplicable is that in a harmonized fashion at the start of the corona crisis outbreak, influencers from around the world were paid. Artists, musicians, comics, social media influencers were all paid to promote these products and to promote the story that this virus was highly lethal and that you needed to be afraid of it. Fear was actively weaponized. Now, in the United States and in the UK, through the nudge units, the 77th Brigade, and other paramilitary or military-related activities in the UK, also in Canada, also in New Zealand, also in Australia, we had the direct involvement of militaries in promoting these psychological operations against their own civilian populations. In the United States, we have a massive PSYOP or PSYWAR capability that was developed for offshore combat But under the current Secretary of Defense in 2010, when he was at Fort Bragg, which is the headquarters for this activity, he signed the 2010 PSYWAR or PSYOP manual for the US military, in which it states that in the event of a major public catastrophe, including a public health event, then the military would be allowed to deploy these technologies on their own civilians. We have abundant evidence from all of the Five Eyes nations, this Five Eyes intelligence alliance that the CIA is at the center of, together with MI5 and MI6, that they deployed these military PSYOP warfare technologies on their own civilians. That's what we're really experiencing, is a major psychological operations activity, a major psychological warfare activity deployed against citizens to get them to comply with governmental and World Health Organization mandates.
So, and the aim, or what's the goal of this in the end? What do you think?
So that is an even harder question. And again, I haven't, I try really hard. So for instance, what I just said about the CIA and the intelligence community, I didn't talk about that for a long time. And recently I had a CIA officer who has since retired, who was involved in the committee that was convened by the CIA to determine whether or not this was a laboratory origin, and in many other activities. And he spoke to me directly about what went on within the CIA. And on the basis of what he told me, together with what I'd heard independently from many others, is what drew me, and the documentation, including the recent congressional testimony about Anthony Fauci being snuck into CIA headquarters, trying to influence that commission, the CIA paying off commission members so they would conclude that it wasn't a laboratory origin, and many other documents. That led me to the conclusions I just stated. I don't have documentation that would allow me to conclude what the agenda is. Many people have spoken about a depopulation agenda, and I've avoided speaking about that until fairly recently, when a colleague of mine obtained and analyzed a document from the US government that represents current US policy called the Kissinger Report. It was developed under Richard Nixon and then made US policy under Gerald Ford, and it remains US policy. And in that document, it clearly states that it was the policy of the US government to attempt to cap worldwide population at 8 billion globally. In January of 2020, the global population had reached, I believe, 7.8 billion. It's now over 8 billion. The report details a number of strategic objectives and processes the US government would deploy in seeking to suppress population growth, particularly in the least developed countries, and particularly to suppress the growth of young male populations in the least developed countries. And the report states directly that the objective is to keep those populations in those countries from consuming their own resources so that they would be available to the West, and particularly to the United States. This has to do with minerals, petroleum, etc. So whether there's a tie between the policies of the COVID crisis that resulted in so much unnecessary death and disease, and the clear, unambiguous policies of the US government and other Western governments and NATO governments to cap population growth globally, is something that I don't know that we'll ever find out. but we clearly do have evidence of a population control agenda that has been developed in the United States and is a central part of the United States foreign policy. There are other agendas. Ernst Wolff in Germany spoke very early and made an eloquent case that there's been a financial objective here. And you cannot deny the data, which shows that we've had the greatest upwards transfer of wealth from poor and middle class to the very wealthy in modern history during the COVID crisis. Those data are indisputable. And we absolutely have had a number of financial policies deployed, which are highly suspect, including debanking that we first saw in the trucker convoy events around the Canadian protests, and Prime Minister Trudeau and his finance minister, who looks like she will be the next Prime Minister of Canada if Mr. Trudeau has his way, both of which are trained by the World Economic Forum in their Young Leaders program. So we have that. We have the clear, unambiguous statements by Klaus Schwab and Thierry in their book, The Great Reset, about the financial agenda and the desire to move forward with a new financial structure, one that seems to be based on the Chinese social credit system. And we have the clear and ambiguous statements from the Bank of International Settlements and many national banks across the world about the desire to move to a digital currency, which will work very well in conjunction with central bank, with social credit systems. So that's the central bank digital currency and its various versions, whether it's the Bank of International Settlements version or the various national versions. And this appears to be something that also has been part of the agenda underneath some of these policies during the COVID crisis. It's very difficult for me to sort out the difference between conspiracy theories and truth, because what we see again and again is things that were considered to be conspiracy theories, let's say a year ago, are now being proven to be true. So for instance, it wasn't long ago that the Great Reset was considered to be a conspiracy theory, even though it was the title of the book published by Klaus Schwab during the COVID crisis. And it was announced by the current King of England when he was still the Prince of Wales. So, we're in a very difficult position as a journalist and a scientist who's now increasingly a journalist and a writer, of trying to make sense out of things, because we're not invited to the Club of Rome or to the Davos meetings, etc. We have to read, we have to judge by their actions and by what they actually publish. And that makes it very difficult to look forward and try to discern intent, other than if we take what they say at face value. And what they say at face value is they wish to move the world towards a different economic structure, a different social structure, towards transhumanism, a fusion of man and machine, towards 15-minute cities, towards carbon neutral. There are clear agendas for all of these things, and almost every one of them is poorly justified based on the science.
Yes, and another thing which is true to those different topics you mentioned is that if you have a different opinion, you are probably labeled, censored, cancelled, and whatnot.
Not allowed to talk about any of them.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe for the last question is that we talked a lot about vaccines in the beginning, and you also said that some medical institutions, I think it was Baylor Medical College in Texas, that
Baylor and the Houston Methodist Hospital System, which is enormous, are
so,
both now requiring it. And Governor Abbott, I think today, has convened a special section of the Texas legislature to outlaw these types of mandates. So
yeah.
we'll see what comes out of that.
Yeah, so there is a pushback, and it's even a political pushback in the United States as well. But what I wanted to ask is, what is the situation right now? Can you have a discussion? Can you have a normal discussion about those, for example, those vaccines, or about those unscientific methods that were used to, restrictions that were used to um, uh, uh, used to control the virus, so to say, lockdowns, etc.
So the answer is no.
Yep.
This is still highly suppressed. The most open, legitimate source, scientific source, medical source, wherein these issues are being discussed is the British Medical Journal. Other than that, there is very little allowed discussion, editorial, or publications that question these policies. And my friend Ryan Cole, for instance, was just put on trial, a very highly credentialed pathologist in the United States, just put on trial by the medical board in the state of Washington in the United States for having used telemedicine to prescribe ivermectin to 4 patients. They put him on trial to try to take his medical license in the state of Washington. I think they succeeded. So there's abundant evidence of continued harassment. I experience it daily. Censorship, defamation, gaslighting, harassment in corporate published media and social media, often from other physicians even. So this is a ongoing campaign. In the United States, there is a case called Missouri versus Biden, which is raising the issue of whether or not the government had the authority to put pressure on social media companies to influence their censorship practices. And it looks like that's going to go to the Supreme Court. And what the government has done during the COVID crisis is set up a new coordinating agency for all this censorship. I think the acronym is CISA. And that group is now prohibited from putting pressure on social media companies through a temporary injunction from the Fifth District Court, federal court. And this case presumably will be heard by the Supreme Court in this upcoming term, as well as a number of cases that relate to various legal aspects of how our administrative state is able to functionally make law, even though that law is not actually authorized by Congress. This has to do with what's called the Chevron defense, or Chevron deference. And so many things are in play here in the United States. There's numerous court cases in progress, but the courts move extremely slow. And in the meantime, there is clearly an effort to market these mismatched vaccine quote boosters. It may be that the tenuous authority that the FDA has still, by their own definition, when the medical emergency was declared complete, I think it was May 11th of this year, so it's no longer in effect. The FDA insisted that they had 180 days, as I recall, to adjust and allow manufacturers to adapt to that change, and that they would be allowed to continue these emergency use authorizations until that date. That date comes up, I think it's November 7th or 9th. It's right around in there. So in the beginning of November, there will be another boundary event for the US government. But as you know, much of Europe is already done with these products. And all that's left is to determine liability and responsibility. And most importantly, how will the vaccine injured be made whole? I think that's what I've heard is that's a very important topic in Europe right now. It's being discussed. I wish it was being discussed more actively in the United States, because what's happened is that all of these manufacturers have been provided a layered indemnity or protection from legal action.
So that's the case in Europe as well.
Yeah. So there are many lessons learned. I think that the public should insist that they be addressed throughout the West. And the logic of providing indemnity to vaccine manufacturers clearly has led to abuses because they're not held accountable. A colleague of mine here in the States has made the case that, for instance, Pfizer technically did not commit fraud, but rather Pfizer delivered the fraud that the US government purchased from them. The US government authorized them to commit that fraud and purchased the products knowing that they were fraudulent, which also absolves Pfizer from any liability here. I think that's a very brief shorthand to describe what has happened here really throughout the West.
Yes. So I have to say it's really nice talking to you, and it's sad that our time is basically running out for today. Thank you, Dr. Malone, for taking the time and talking to us.
It's been my pleasure. I hope that this was helpful and that it helps your audience. Again, as I've said so many times, I recommend that you don't accept what I say at face value, but rather do your own diligence. I'm saying things that are not allowed to be said, and what you as a critical thinker should do is get information from as many sources as possible, and then make your own determination about what is true and what is false and what is propaganda. Don't just rely on me or on journalists. Think for yourself.
Yes, this is a really good recommendation. Thank you, Dr. Malone. I do recommend, for more information, to look up Dr. Malone's publication on Substack. The name of his publication is Who is Robert Malone?
Or the URL is rwmalonemd at .substack.com. rwmalonemd.substack.com. It's free. You don't have to pay. But if you want it to go to your email address, you do have to give them your email address.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malone. And this is it from us for today. And thank you for watching, and see you soon.